The Green Titan awoke to crimson skies and barren wastelands stretching endlessly before him. No heroes to hunt him, no voices calling for his destruction, only the distant thunder of savage war and the stench of blood soaked into the very soil. He felt it instantly. This universe pulling at him, feeding his rage, making him stronger than he had ever been before. The primitive green creatures surrounding him fell to their knees in worship, sensing power beyond their comprehension. But as the Hulk's roar shook the heavens, something stirred in the darkness between stars, ancient minds turning their gaze upon this new anomaly. In a galaxy drowning in eternal war, would the strongest one there is become its greatest conqueror or its final destroyer? The sky bled crimson over the death world of Golgoth, its twin suns casting long shadows across vast wastelands of twisted metal and bone. Imperial surveyors had marked this planet for exterminatus centuries ago. Yet something had stayed the Emperor's hand. Perhaps it was foresight, or perhaps mere oversight. Now, as reality itself tore open in a howling vortex of green warp fire, the question became moot. The tear in the fabric of space grew, pulsing with unnatural energies that sent arcs of Vidian lightning cascading across the barren plains. Even the feral orcs that had claimed this wasteland as their own fell silent, their primitive minds sensing something beyond their comprehension approaching. From the depths of the anomaly emerged a figure of impossible proportions. Muscles corded like adamantine cables beneath skin the colour of nuclear radiation. Standing taller than even the mightiest of the Greenkins, the being crashed to the ground with such force that the earth split beneath him, creating a crater 50 min wide. For a moment, all was still. Then his eyes opened, burning with the same unnatural green as the portal that had delivered him. The Hulk had arrived in the grim darkness of the far future. The closest orcs, driven by instinct rather than reason, charged the newcomer with rusted choppers raised high. Their bellows of war echoed across the wasteland, drawing more of their kind from hiding places among the scrap. The first green skin to reach the massive figure swung its blade with enough force to cleave through ceramite armour. The crude weapon shattered against the Hulk's chest, fragmenting into a dozen useless pieces of metal. The green giant's response was immediate and devastating. His fist, larger than an orc's head, smashed through the creature's torso with such violence that the body exploded in a shower of viscera and spores. The remaining attackers hesitated, their tiny brains struggling to process what they had witnessed. This moment of doubt was their undoing. The Hulk moved with speed that belied his enormous bulk, crossing the distance to the orc mob in 3 titanic bounds. He seized the largest among them, lifting the struggling green skin high above his head before bringing it down upon his knee with a sickening crack. The orc's spine shattered, yet still it lived, its regenerative abilities working frantically to repair the damage. The Hulk cast the broken body aside and turned to face the others, Hulk strongest. The roar shook the very ground, causing loose scrap to slide from nearby piles. The remaining orcs backed away, their usual bloodlust tempered by something they rarely experienced: fear. One orc, larger than the others and adorned with crude trophies of battle, stepped forward. The knob narrowed its red eyes, assessing this new threat with cunning unusual for its species. You big, you green, you strong. It growled in broken Gothic, but grim, darker, stronger. Grim, darker war boss. The knob charged, wielding a massive power claw that crackled with stolen energy. The weapon's teeth bit into the Hulk's shoulder, drawing fluorescent blood that sizzled when it hit the ground. Pain fueled the green giant's rage, his muscles visibly swelling as his anger intensified. He seized the power claw in one hand, crushing the mechanism with contemptuous ease, then lifted Grim Darker by the throat. Hulk, strongest Hulk. Warbows now, he declared, squeezing until the orc's throat collapsed in his grip. The dying knob thrashed briefly before going still, its last act a gesture of deference, dropping its remaining weapon at the Hulk's feet. The surrounding orcs fell to their knees, pressing their foreheads to the dirt. This was the way of their kind. Strength recognized and followed. The strongest leads, and none was stronger than this green monster who had felled their war boss with his bare hands. They began to chant, a guttural sound that started low and grew in volume. Hulk! 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 The green giant looked upon his new followers, a cruel smile spreading across his face. In his mind, fragmented memories of another life, another universe swirled like debris in a storm. He remembered being hunted, hated, feared. Here in this new world, he would be the hunter. He would build an army that feared nothing, and they would make the galaxy tremble. Hulk, lead. Wah! He roared, and the orcs took up the cry, their voices carrying for kilometers across the wasteland. More of their kind emerged from the scrap piles, drawn by the promise of a new war boss and the glory of conquest. Deep within the Hulk's consciousness, the fragmented mind of Bruce Banner stirred. This place, this reality was wrong. The physics, the very fabric of existence seemed altered. The rage that had always been his curse now felt like a beacon, drawing upon energies that he could not comprehend. The warp, unfathomable and infinite, touched his fury and was changed by it, just as he was changed in return. Banner's consciousness, usually fighting for control, instead found itself merging with the Hulk's in ways never before possible. Knowledge, strategy, and cunning flowed between them, creating something new and terrifying, a Hulk with purpose, a Hulk with plans. Over the following weeks, more orcs flocked to Golgoth, drawn by a psychic beacon that resonated through their collective unconscious. The strongest war boss in generations had emerged, and the WAAGH was building. The Hulk imposed a brutal order upon the usually chaotic Greenkins, smashing those who challenged him and rewarding those who proved useful. Mech laboured day and night, constructing weapons and vehicles to his specifications. Designs born from Banner's scientific genius filtered through the Hulk's instinctive understanding of warfare. The orcs, usually content with cobbled-together scrap that barely functioned, found themselves building machines of surprising effectiveness under their new war boss's direction. Tanks with properly aligned tracks that didn't throw themselves apart at high speeds, guns that didn't explode as often when fired. The WAGHA energy that all orcs generated unconsciously seemed to flow more efficiently, guided by the Hulk's singular will and Banner's ordered mind. 6 months after his arrival, the Hulk stood atop a mountain of scrap surveying his growing army. Thousands of orcs, from the smallest Gretchen to the mightiest Nobs, gathered below. Dozens of tanks and war machines idled, belching black smoke into the already polluted atmosphere. Looted aircraft screamed overhead in formations more disciplined than any Imperial observer would have believed possible from Greenkins. "Time to leave," the Hulk bellowed, his voice carrying over the assembled horde. "Find new worlds, find new enemies, crush all who stand against Hulk." The response was deafening, a WR cry so powerful that it rippled through the warp itself, causing astropaths across the sector to cry out in pain and terror. Somewhere in the void between worlds, something ancient stirred, disturbed by the psychic echo. The first world to fall to the Hulk's wall was a minor Imperial mining colony, its PDF, overwhelmed in hours by the unexpectedly coordinated orc assault. The Hulk himself led the attack, smashing through the colony's main defensive wall with his bare hands, creating a breach for his followers to pour through. The planetary governor, a corpulent man unused to actual combat, attempted to surrender, offering the Hulk vast wealth in exchange for his life. The Hulk lifted the man with one hand, studying him with contemptuous green eyes. "Hulk not want gold. Hulk want war." The governor's pleas ended abruptly as the Hulk crushed his skull like overripe fruit. The remaining defenders were slaughtered, their weapons and equipment salvaged to strengthen the growing W. The few survivors were left alive, broken and traumatized to spread word of the new war boss, who commanded not just with brute strength, but with terrible intelligence. 3 more worlds fell in rapid succession, each conquest adding to the Hulk's forces and reputation. Imperial response was fragmented and inadequate, hampered by the bureaucratic inefficiency of the administratum and the vast distances between systems. By the time a coherent defense could be organized, the Hulk's WA had grown to a size not seen since the days of Guskull Thraka himself. It was on the Agra world of Tandalus Prime that the Imperium finally mounted a significant resistance. The 114th Cadian Regiment, veterans of countless campaigns against the enemies of mankind, established defensive positions around the planet's main food processing facilities. Colonel Vern Triss, a grizzled officer with 4 decades of service, deployed his forces with careful precision, creating killing fields covered by overlapping fields of fire from heavy weapons teams. "They're just orcs," he assured his officers during the final briefing. More organised than usual according to reports, but still just Greenkins. Their so-called war bosses might be unusually large, but nothing a few basilisk rounds won't solve. The Emperor protects. The attack began at dawn, as Imperial prognosticators had predicted. What they had not predicted was the discipline displayed by the Orc forces. Instead of the usual headlong charge into the teeth of Imperial guns, the Greenskins advanced under cover of smoke, using captured Imperial tanks as mobile cover. Worse, they had somehow managed to jam Vox communications, leaving Imperial forces unable to coordinate effectively. Colonel Terrace watched through magnoculars as his carefully planned defensive line began to crumble under the unexpected tactics. "That's not possible," he muttered. "Orcs don't fight like this. They don't think like this, sir." A junior officer pointed to the horizon. "Look." Emerging from the smoke came a figure of nightmarish proportions. The Hulk towered over even the largest of his Orc followers, his green skin rippling with muscles that seemed to grow more powerful with each step. Imperial guns turned toward this new threat, lust fire and solid rounds impacting against his body with no apparent effect. A basilisk artillery piece fired directly at him, the shells striking him square in the chest and detonating in a blinding flash. When the smoke cleared, the Hulk stood unmarked, his eyes burning with rage and something worse. Recognition purpose. He charged the Imperial line, moving faster than anything so large had a right to move. The ground shook with each footfall, his path taking him directly toward the command post where Terrace stood. "All guns! Target that Xenos abomination!" Terrace ordered, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his heart. Heavy bolters and Autok cannons poured fire into the advancing giant, creating a storm of explosions and smoke that momentarily obscured him from view. Hope flared briefly in the colonel's chest, then died as the Hulk emerged from the storm of fire, his skin now marked with wounds that leaked luminous blood. But these injuries, which would have killed any normal being many times over, seemed only to enrage him further. His muscles swelled visibly, his height increasing by nearly a meter as his rage fueled impossible growth. "Emperor, protect us!" whispered Terrace as the Hulk reached the defensive line. What followed was not combat, but slaughter. The Hulk tore through a Lehman Russ battle tank as if it were made of parchment, ripping the turret free and hurling it with such force that it crushed a squad of guardsmen 50 meters away. A commissar charged forward, power sword raised high, only to be swatted aside with contemptuous ease, his body breaking against the side of a bunker with wet finality. Colonel Terrace drew his bolt pistol, knowing it was futile but determined to die on his feet as befitted Olden. He fired until the magazine was empty, each mass-reactive round detonating against the Hulk's chest and face, opening wounds that sealed almost as quickly as they appeared. The Hulk seized the colonel in one massive hand, lifting him to eye level. "You fight good," the monster growled, something like respect in his voice, but Hulk's strongest there is. With those words he crushed Terrace like a ripe fruit, tossing the remains aside before turning his attention to the rest of the Imperial forces. Without leadership, their resistance collapsed. By nightfall, Tantalus Prime belonged to the WAM. News of the defeat spread through Imperial channels along with picked captures of the New Orc war boss. Strategic analysts puzzled over the creature, which resembled no known Orc variant. Some theorized it might be some new evolution of the Beast of Olenor. Others suggested it might be a gene-crafted weapon created by the fallen Primarch Fabius Bile. All agreed that it represented a threat that required immediate response. In the darkness between stars, a strike cruiser of the Angels Vermilion chapter changed course. Brother Captain Sanguinus Thorn had received the astropathic distress call from Tantalus Prime, along with the fragmented images of the creature responsible for its fall. Something about the massive green humanoid stirred memories of ancient texts he had studied in the chapter's forbidden archives. Texts that spoke of beings from beyond reality, harbingers of doom who heralded the end of sanity itself. Set course for the Golgo-Goth system. He ordered his bridge crew and awakened the Liberius. We will need their insight for what comes. As the strike cruiser sliced through the warp toward its destination, Captain Thorn descended to the ship's reclusium, a chamber of reverent silence where the chapter's most sacred relics were kept. He approached a stasis field containing an ancient tome, its cover made from the preserved skin of some long-extinct xeno-species. With a command word, the field deactivated, allowing him to carefully open the book to pages he had marked years before. The illustrations were crude but recognizable. A green giant surrounded by destruction, facing warriors in archaic power armor. The text, written in a dialect of High Gothic, so ancient that few living souls could decipher it, spoke of a world breaker who fed on rage and grew stronger from all attempts to destroy him. It described a being cast out from another reality, doomed to wander the stars, bringing ruin wherever he went. The prophecy manifests, Thorn whispered, his enhanced transhuman senses detecting the approach of another before the chamber door opened. Chief Librarian Epistolary Kais entered, his psychic hood humming with suppressed energy. "You found something, Brother Captain," Thorn indicated the open book. "A legend, a warning." The creature leading the orcs matches this description too closely to be coincidence. Kais studied the ancient text, his psychically attuned mind translating meanings beyond mere words. If this is accurate, then conventional weapons will only make this being stronger. Each injury, each attack fuels its power. "Then how do we destroy it?" Thorn asked. The librarian's eyes glowed briefly with inner fire. "We cannot. Not directly, but the text speaks of a division within the creature. 2 minds, 2 souls, locked in eternal conflict. Perhaps therein lies our opportunity," Captain Thorn nodded grimly. "We will need to capture this being, then study it. Find its weakness, a dangerous gambit," Kais warned. "The text suggests that those who sought to contain the Worldbreaker invariably fell victim to him. Nevertheless, it is our duty. The Emperor expects no less." Thorn closed the ancient tome carefully. "Make the necessary preparations. When we reach the Golgoth system, we will deploy the Librarius in force, along with the chapter's best warriors." As the Angels Vermilion prepared for their confrontation with the Hulk, the Green Warlord himself continued to consolidate his power. After conquering Tandalus Prime, he established a base of operations on the planet, using it as a staging ground for further conquest. Unlike typical orc war bosses who would have stripped the world bare and moved on, the Hulk maintained the Agri-world's food production, understanding its strategic value for sustaining his growing wag. This uncharacteristic foresight troubled Imperial tacticians more than his brute strength. Orcs were supposed to be predictable in their savagery. This new war boss displayed cunning that bordered on heretical intelligence. Some even whispered that he might be receiving guidance from chaos entities, though there was no evidence of chaotic corruption in the picked captures analysed by the Ordo Xenos. The truth was far stranger. As the Hulk's rage interacted with the psychic energy of the WG, Banner's consciousness gained greater influence. The scientist's intellect, combined with the Hulk's instinctive understanding of warfare, created a synergy that made them more dangerous than either would have been alone. Banner provided strategy and technological insight, while the Hulk provided the overwhelming strength and the primal connection to the Orc's psyche that allowed him to command their loyalty. It was this combined intelligence that recognized the approaching Space Marine vessel long before it reached the Golgoth system. The Hulk ordered his mechs to prepare defenses not just on the planet's surface, but in orbit as well. Looted Imperial ships and cobbled-together Orc vessels moved into defensive formations that would have impressed even veteran fleet admirals. When the Angels Vermilion strike cruiser, the Sanguine Redemption, translated from the warp at the system's edge, they found themselves facing an organized defense that no Imperial commander would have expected from Orcs. Brother Captain Thorn stood on the bridge, his transhuman features set in a grim expression as he studied the tactical display. "They knew we were coming," he said, his voice carrying no emotion despite the implications. "Prepare for void combat. Launch Thunderhawks when we close to optimal range." The void battle that followed was brief but intense. Orc vessels, normally easy prey for the superior technology and discipline of Space Marines, fought with unexpected coordination. They focused fire on the strike cruiser's engines, attempting to rather than destroy, a tactic that suggested planning beyond typical greenskin capabilities. Despite this, the Sanguine Redemption broke through the defensive line, its superior weapons cutting through several Orc ships. As they approached Golgoth, Thunderhawk gunships launched from the cruiser's bay, each carrying squads of Angels Vermilion Marines prepared for drop assault. Among them was a specialized team of librarians and apothecaries, tasked with capturing the anomalous war boss if possible. The Hulk watched the approaching craft from a massive throne constructed from the wreckage of Imperial tanks. His enhanced senses, further amplified by the strange energies of this universe, allowed him to perceive details that would have been invisible to normal eyes. He recognized the crimson armor of the Space Marines, different from any he had faced before, but similar enough to trigger memories of other armored enemies from his original reality. "Come," he growled, rising to his full height, now nearly 4 mem tall after months of constant battle and growth. "Hulk ready." The Thunderhawks descended through the atmosphere, weathering fire from crude but effective Orc anti-air batteries. Several took hits, but the rugged craft continued their approach, protected by void shields and ceramite armor. They touched down in a loose circle around what Imperial scans had identified as the main Orc encampment, disgorging their cargo of transhuman warriors in a synchronous assault designed to overwhelm through speed and precision. Brother Captain Thorn led the primary assault team, his power sword crackling with energy as he cut down the first wave of Orc defenders. Around him, his battle brothers moved with the coordinated precision that made Adeptus Astartes the Emperor's finest warriors. Bolters roared, each mass-reactive round finding its target with unerring accuracy, exploding inside Orc bodies and turning them into gory ruin. Under normal circumstances, such an assault would have broken an Orc force of this size. The Greenkins relied on overwhelming numbers and brute force, not the disciplined resistance that now faced the Angels Vermilion. Orc gunners held their positions despite casualties, maintaining overlapping fields of fire that forced the Space Marines to advance carefully. Nobs led countercharges at precisely the right moments to disrupt the estate's formation, displaying tactical awareness that no Imperial commander had ever attributed to Orcs. And through it all, there was no sign of the massive green war boss, Librarian Chaos. Thorn voxed as he decapitated an Orc Nob with a precise sweep of his power sword. Do you sense the target? The Chief Librarian, his armor's systems dampened to allow greater psychic sensitivity, focused his mind outward. The WAGH energy generated by so many Orcs created a psychic static that was difficult to penetrate, but within it he sensed something else, a nexus of rage so pure, so concentrated that it stood out like a beacon. Below us, Kais replied, his voice strained from the psychic effort. He waits beneath the main structure. And Captain, he knows we're here for him specifically. Thorn acknowledged the information with a curt affirmative, then switched to the command channel. All units converge on the central structure. The primary target is subterranean assault pattern Helios. Across the battlefield, the Angels Vermilion adjusted their advance, pushing toward the center of the Orc encampment, where a massive structure resembling a cross between a fortress and a scrap heap dominated the landscape. As they drew closer, the Orc resistance intensified, with the largest and most heavily armed Greenkins forming a defensive perimeter around the structure. Chief Librarian Kais gathered his fellow Psykers, forming a wedge that pushed forward through the Orc line. Their psychic hoods flared with energy as they unleashed their powers, sending bolts of warp lightning into the densest concentrations of enemies. Orcs caught in these psychic attacks convulsed and fell, their crude nervous systems overwhelmed by energies they could not comprehend. As they reached the base of the central structure, the ground began to tremble. The vibrations grew stronger, dust and debris falling from the rickety Orc construction above. Then, with a roar that seemed to shake the very air, the ground erupted outward as the Hulk burst through, launching himself into the midst of the Space Marine formation. The first Astartes to react was Brother Martius, a veteran of 3 centuries of warfare. His plasma gun discharged, the superheated matter striking the Hulk square in the chest, burning away a section of green flesh. The pros save him mossing to worrying violent the size of a human head. Any normal enemy, even another Space Marine, would have been killed instantly by such a wound. The Hulk merely roared, the sound containing equal parts pain and escalating fury. Before Martius could fire again, a massive green fist closed around him, crushing ceramite armor and transhuman bone with equal ease. The Space Marine's enhanced physiology kept him conscious long enough to feel his body being torn in half, his gene seed and vital organs pulped beyond recovery. "Fall back. Maintain fire discipline," Captain Thorn ordered, recognizing immediately that direct close-quarters combat with the creature was suicide. The estates withdrew in good order, bolters firing continuously to cover their tactical repositioning. The Hulk pursued, each step causing the ground to crack beneath his massive weight. Bolter rounds peppered his body, each mass reactive shell detonating in small explosions of flesh and blood. But the wounds, grievous as they were, healed almost instantly. Worse, each injury seemed to fuel the creature's rage, causing his muscles to swell and his strength to increase visibly. Physical attacks are strengthening it. Kais voxed, confirming what they were all witnessing, switching to psychic assault. The librarians concentrated their power, sending tendrils of psychic energy toward the rampaging giant. Unlike physical attacks, these seemed to have a more pronounced effect. The Hulk staggered, his advance momentarily halted as the psychic assault targeted his mind rather than his nearly invulnerable body. "Banner," he growled, one massive hand clutching his head. "No banner, only Hulk." This reaction confirmed Kais's theory. There was indeed another consciousness within the creature, one that could potentially be reached. "Focus on that division," he instructed his fellow librarians. "Drive the wedge deeper." The coordinated psychic attack intensified, the librarians channeling their power through Kais. The Hulk's advance stopped completely, his massive form trembling as an internal battle raged. For a brief moment the green of his skin seemed to fade, muscles shrinking slightly as the alter ego fought for control. Then the moment passed. The Hulk's eyes snapped open, burning with renewed fury. "Nice try," he snarled, displaying an articulation that surprised the Space Marines. But Banner and Hulk won now, stronger together. With that declaration, he slammed both fists into the ground, creating a shockwave that knocked even the sure-footed estates off balance. Before they could recover, he was among them again, grabbing the nearest librarian and using his body as a club to strike down two more battle brothers. Calibra's formation. Thorn ordered, recognizing that conventional tactics were failing. The surviving angels Vermilion moved with practiced precision, forming a ring around the Hulk while maintaining maximum distance. From these positions they unleashed everything in their arsenal from bolter fire to plasma weapons to crack grenades, creating a storm of destruction focused on the green giant. For a moment the Hulk disappeared within the explosions and smoke. Then with a roar of defiance he leaped from the maelstrom, his trajectory carrying him directly toward Captain Thorn. The Space Marine commander barely had time to raise his storm shield before the Hulk crashed into him, with the force of a drop pod making planetfall. The shield, a masterwork of artifice designed to withstand anti-tank weapons, crumpled under the impact. Thorn was driven 5 Mr. backward, his power armor systems flashing critical warnings across his retinal display. Internal bleeding, multiple fractures, organ damage. Only his transhuman physiology and the armor's emergency medical systems kept him conscious and functioning. "You, leader," the Hulk growled, looming over the fallen captain. Hulk respects strong enemies, but none stronger than Hulk. As the green giant raised his fists for a killing blow, a blindingly bright beam of energy struck him from above, the intensity so great that it cast stark shadows across the battlefield. The Hulk was driven to one knee, his skin blackening under the assault. Looking up, he saw the source. The strike cruiser in orbit had brought its main gun to bear, focusing a lance strike directly on his position. All weapons. Thorn gasped into his vox, fighting through the pain. "Everything we have." The remaining Angels Vermilion opened fire simultaneously, adding their firepower to the lance strike from orbit. The Hulk disappeared within a column of light and destruction so intense that the Space Marines' autosenses had to dim to prevent blindness. The barrage continued for nearly a full minute, turning the surrounding area into a crater of glass and slag. When the firing finally ceased, nothing could be seen through the smoke and dust. For a brief moment, Captain Thorn allowed himself to hope that they had succeeded where all else had failed. Then a silhouette appeared within the smoke. The Hulk emerged, his body heavily damaged, flesh burned away in places to reveal muscle and bone beneath. One eye was gone, a gaping socket that even now was beginning to fill with regenerating tissue. But he lived. More than that, he seemed stronger than before, his muscles swollen to grotesque proportions, fueled by pain and rage beyond mortal comprehension. "Not enough," he rumbled, his voice deeper, more guttural than before. "Never enough." The Hulk charged again, moving faster than anything so large had any right to move. This time there was no stopping him. Space Marines were torn apart, their gene-enhanced bodies no match for the creature's impossible strength. Kais attempted a last desperate psychic attack, focusing all his remaining power on immobilizing the rampaging giant. For an instant, it worked. The Hulk froze mid-stride, his expression contorted in a grimace of effort as he fought the psychic bonds. Kais pushed harder, blood streaming from his nose and ears as he channeled more power than was safe, risking his own mind in the process. "I see you," the librarian whispered, his psychic senses penetrating deeper into the Hulk's consciousness than before. "I see both of you. What are you? Where do you come from?" Images flashed through Kais's mind, too fast and alien to fully comprehend. Another reality similar yet fundamentally different from their own. A man, brilliant but flawed, subjected to radiation that should have killed him. Transformation, pursuit, endless conflict. And finally, a tear in reality, a passage through dimensions that should have been impossible. You don't belong here, Kais realized. This universe is rejecting you like an infection. That's why your power grows unchecked. The natural laws that constrained you in your reality don't fully apply here. The Hulk's grimace transformed into a savage grin. Hulk belongs nowhere. Hulk makes own place here. Now, with a flex of muscles that seemed to distort the very air around him, the Hulk shattered the psychic bonds. Kais had no time to scream as a massive hand closed around him, crushing his psychically attuned brain to pulp within his helmet. Captain Thorne, watching his brothers die one by one, made the only decision left to him. Sanguine redemption. He voxed to the strike cruiser above, enact Protocol Terminus Authorization Thorne Vermilion Extremis. The acknowledgement came as a single click over the vox. In orbit, the strike cruiser's reactor safeguards disengaged, power building to levels far beyond design specifications. The vessel's machine spirit, understanding its final duty, calculated a precise trajectory. The Hulk, standing triumphant amidst the broken bodies of the Angels Vermilion, looked up as a new sun bloomed in the sky. The strike cruiser, its reactor approaching critical overload, plummeted through the atmosphere on a direct course for his position. There was no evasion possible, no defense against such an attack. The impact was apocalyptic. The reactor detonation, combined with the kinetic energy of the falling vessel, created an explosion visible from neighbouring star systems. A mushroom cloud rose 20 kilometres into Golgoth's atmosphere, while a shock wave of unimaginable force scoured the surface for hundreds of kilom in all directions. Nothing could have survived at the epicentre of such destruction. Yet, as the dust began to settle days later, movement stirred within the radioactive crater. The Hulk emerged, his body reduced to a skeletal frame with strips of meat clinging to bone. His regenerative abilities, enhanced by the ambient radiation and the unique properties of this universe, worked frantically to rebuild him. Each cell divided and multiplied, knitting flesh and sinew back together at an accelerating rate. As his brain reformed, fractured memories reassembled themselves. The battle with the Crimson Armoured Warriors, their leader's final defiance, the falling star that had nearly destroyed him. And through it all, the scientist's voice in his mind, analysing, calculating, planning the sacrifice of the Angels Vermilion, had not been in vain. The destruction had obliterated the Orkwag nearly completely, killing millions of greenkins and destroying the infrastructure the Hulk had built. It would take time to rebuild, to gather a new army. But time was the one resource the Green Giant had in abundance. Far across the galaxy in the fortress monastery of the Angels Vermilion, a single data slate activated, receiving a transmission sent before the strike cruiser's destruction. The picked captures and readings taken during the battle, along with Chief Librarian Kais's psychic impressions, were transmitted to the chapter's archives. A warning for future generations about the Green World Breaker and the threat he posed. And further still, in the depths of Mars, coitators hummed as they processed fragmentary reports from the Golgoth system. The entity designated Anomaly Virides had displayed capabilities that defied conventional classification. The Adeptus Mechanicus marked the data with their highest priority runes, disseminating it to select magibiologists for further analysis. If the creature had survived, as some fragmentary reading suggested might be possible, then new countermeasures would be required. 3 years passed. The Imperium, faced with countless threats across its vast domains, had all but forgotten the strange Orc war boss who had briefly terrorized a single sector. Reports of unusual Orc activity near Golgoth were noted but assigned low priority. The Tyranid Hive Fleet behemoth demanded more immediate attention, along with increased chaos activity in the Cadian sector. On the death world of Kitachin, members of the 183rd Jungle Fighters Regiment conducted routine patrols through the dense, hostile jungle. Sergeant Harker, a veteran whose body bore more scars than unblemished skin, led a squad through territory marked for potential Tyranid infiltration. "Movement ahead," whispered Trooper Jens, her OPEX unit detecting something large approaching their position. Harker signalled for his squad to take cover, their camouflaged forms blending with the toxic vegetation. Through the dense foliage emerged a massive figure, green-skinned and heavily muscled, yet moving with surprising stealth for something so large. For a moment, Harker thought it might be an unusually large orc, but the proportions were wrong, the head too small in relation to the body, the posture too erect. As the figure drew closer, Harker could make out more details. The creature wore only tattered remains of what might once have been Imperial Guard fatigues stretched across a torso rippling with muscles that seemed barely contained by its green skin. Harker signalled his squad to hold position. Whatever this creature was, engaging it without understanding it, capabilities would be suicide. The thing paused, lifting its head like a predator catching a scent. Then its head turned, eyes fixing directly on Harker's position, despite the excellent camouflage. "Katachan soldiers," it rumbled, its voice like stones grinding together. "Come out, Hulk. See ya." Harker weighed his options quickly. If the creature had already spotted them, the element of surprise was lost. Better to face it on their terms than wait for it to attack. He gave a subtle hand signal, and his squad emerged from cover. Hell guns trained on the green giant. "Identify yourself, Xenos," Harker demanded, his voice betraying none of the unease he felt. The creature before him emanated power unlike anything he had encountered in decades of fighting on one of the deadliest planets in the Imperium. The green giant smiled, an expression more terrifying than reassuring on his inhuman face. Banner told Hulk about Katachan. Strongest humans like to see how strong. Before Harker could respond, a disturbance in the jungle behind them drew his attention. Massive forms crashed through the undergrowth, chitinous plates gleaming dully in the filtered sunlight. Tyranids. Ultra led the pack, its chameleonic skin shifting to match the surrounding vegetation, followed by a brood of hormigants, their scythe limbs clicking in anticipation of the kill. Ambush defensive formation. Harker barked, his squad reacting with practiced efficiency, forming a circle with their backs to each other. But they were outnumbered at least 3-1, with more Tyranid biosignatures appearing on the Auspex by the second. The Hulk turned toward the new threat, his posture shifting subtly. "Bugs," he growled, recognition in his voice. "Hulk hate bugs." The lictor struck first, launching itself toward the Katachan sergeant with blinding speed. Harker raised his weapon, knowing it was already too late. Then a green blur intercepted the Tyranid assassin mid-leap. The Hulk caught the lair by one of its thing talons, the razor-sharp biological weapon, failing to penetrate his tough hide. Too slow, the Hulk snarled before ripping the liar's limb from its socket. Purple ichor sprayed across the jungle floor as the Tyranid screeched in alien pain. The Hulk followed up by slamming the creature against a massive Katachan deviltree with such force that its exoskeleton shattered, vital organs rupturing from the impact. The Hormigants, driven by the synaptic commands of their hive mind, swarmed toward the new threat. The Hulk met them head-on, a green avalanche of destruction. His massive fists pulverized Tyranid bodies, smashing through Catan as if it were parchment. Limbs and viscera flew in all directions as he tore through the brood, each blow pulping another of the alien horrors. Harker and his squad added their hellgun fire to the battle, cutting down Tyranids with disciplined volleys. But it was clear to all of them that their contribution was secondary. The green giant was a force of nature, unstoppable and devastating. A warrior-caste Tyranid twice the size of a Hormigant leapt onto the Hulk's back, digging its claws deep into green flesh. The Hulk roared, reaching back to grasp the creature and tear it free, taking chunks of his own flesh with it. The wounds sealed almost instantly, muscle and skin knitting back together before Harker's astonished eyes. Within minutes, the Tyranid attackers lay dead, their bodies broken and scattered across the jungle floor. The Hulk stood among the carnage, breathing heavily, not from exhaustion, but from the exhilaration of combat. He turned to the Katachan soldiers, who maintained their weapons trained on him despite the assistance he had provided. "You strong?" he acknowledged, nodding toward Harker. "For humans?" "What are you?" Harker asked, his finger still resting on the trigger of his hellgun. "You're no orc. Hulk is Hulk," came the simple reply. Then with a nuance that surprised the veteran, "Sergeant," he added, "need soldiers, strong soldiers, bugs everywhere now, getting smarter." Harker narrowed his eyes. "You're fighting the Tyranids?" The Hulk nodded. 3 years, many battles. Bugs adapt, send bigger ones each time, need army. The tactical implications were immediately clear to Harker. Whatever this creature was, it had been engaging the Tyranid forces on Katachan. possibly diverting significant resources from the hive mind's main advance. If true, it explained why Tyranid infiltration on Katchan had been lighter than Imperial tacticians had predicted. You were the war boss, Harker realized, remembering briefings from years ago about an anomalous Orc leader who had briefly threatened Imperial worlds before disappearing after an Astartes intervention. The one who led the W.A. Ghoul sector. The Hulk's eyes narrowed. Hulk led Orcs. Orcs weak. Bugs killed most. Rest ran. Hulk fight alone since a decision crystallized in Harker's mind. Against all Imperial protocol, against everything he had been taught about Xeno's threats, he lowered his weapon slightly. We have a common enemy. The Tyranids threaten all life in this sector, maybe the entire segmentum if they aren't stopped. Surgent. One of his troopers hissed in warning, but Harker silenced her with a gesture. I'm not suggesting we become friends with it, Vasquez, but a temporary alliance against the Tyranids might be the only way to survive what's coming. He turned back to the Hulk. Our regimental command post is 3 clicks east. I can take you there, let you speak with the colonel, but one wrong move, one hint that you're a threat to my people, and we'll do our damnedest to put you down. Clear. The Hulk's mouth twisted in what might have been amusement. Clear. Lead way, little man. The journey to the Katachchan 183rd Command Post was tense, with the Hulk following the patrol at a respectful distance. Harker voxed ahead, warning of their unusual guest and requesting the colonel's presence. By the time they arrived at the camouflaged Imperial position, a reception committee had formed, including Colonel Straken himself, his mechanical arm humming as power flowed to the built-in weapon systems. Emperor's teeth, Straken muttered as the Hulk came into view. When you said big, Harker, I thought you meant big for a human. The meeting that followed was unlike any in Imperial records. The Hulk, displaying intelligence and articulation that belied his brutish appearance, described the Tyranid forces he had encountered over the past 3 years. He spoke of adaptation, of new strains developed specifically to counter his incredible strength and regenerative abilities, and he spoke of a purpose that had gradually crystallized in his mind, a goal that aligned temporarily with Imperial interests. Hive mind wants Hulk, he explained, his deep voice carrying easily through the jungle clearing. Tries to take Hulk DNA, make new bugs, stronger bugs. Hulk stopped this. Straken, a veteran of countless campaigns who had lost half his body to a monstrous Katachchan devil, recognized the strategic value of the situation. So you want to work with us against the Tyranids? What happens after? Assuming we win, the Hulk's expression darkened. After is after. Now is now. A temporary alliance was formed, unprecedented in Imperial history. The Green Giant who had once led an Orc WR, now fought alongside the Katachchan 183rd against waves of Tyranid attackers. Imperial tacticians, initially skeptical, soon recognized the value of the arrangement. The Hulk served as a living weapon of mass destruction, absorbing the brunt of Tyranid assaults that would have overwhelmed Imperial positions. For his part, the Hulk found a grudging respect for the Katachchan soldiers. Unlike the Orcs he had led before, these humans fought with discipline and tactical acumen that reminded him of soldiers from his original reality. They were fragile compared to him, but they compensated with cunning and sheer determination. Within Banner's consciousness, still merged with the Hulk's, but retaining distinct awareness, scientific curiosity bloomed. The Tyranids represented a biological puzzle, unlike anything he had encountered before. Their ability to adapt, to incorporate genetic material from consumed species, fascinated and horrified him in equal measure. Through the Hulk, he began to understand the true nature of the threat they posed, not just to this planet, but to all life in the galaxy. 6 months into their uneasy alliance, Katachchan orbital monitors detected a massive disturbance in the upper atmosphere. A Tyranid hive ship previously hidden behind the planet's larger moon moved into low orbit, disgorging thousands of myetic spores toward the surface. The hive mind had committed significant resources to eliminating the threat posed by the Hulk and his human allies. In the command bunker, hastily established beneath the jungle canopy, Colonel Straken studied the tactical display with grim determination. They're targeting our position specifically, he noted as the projected landing sites of the spores clustered around their location. This isn't a general invasion. It's an assassination. The Hulk, who had been studying the display with unexpected intensity, nodded, hive mind getting desperate. Good. Straken raised an eyebrow. Good. We're about to be overrun by more Tyranids than we've seen in the entire campaign so far. Bugs send everything means Hulk hurt them, but also means chance to end fight. The Colonel understood immediately. The Hive ship. If we can destroy it while it's in low orbit, we eliminate the synaptic control for the entire Tyranid force on Katachchan. The Hulk's grin was feral. Hulk, go up. Hulk, smash ship. And how exactly do you plan to reach orbit? Straken asked, his tone suggesting he already suspected the answer wouldn't involve conventional transportation. Instead of replying, the Hulk turned and left the bunker, heading toward the clearing outside. Straken and Sergeant Harker followed, watching as the green giant surveyed the jungle canopy above, gauging distances and angles with unexpected precision. You're going to jump, Harker realized, the incredule clear in his voice despite his usual stoicism. That's insane, even for you. Hulk jumped higher before. Different world, different rules. The green giant looked at the Katachchan soldiers, his expression unreadable. Keep Bugs busy here, give Hulk time. Straken nodded. A decision made. Well, give you your window, don't waste it. As the Hulk moved to a position that offered a clear path through the canopy, Straken ordered his regiment to battle stations. They would face the brunt of the Tyranid assault, buying time for their unlikely ally to attempt what seemed impossible. The first mice spores were already visible, fiery trails cutting through Katachchan's upper atmosphere. The Hulk closed his eyes briefly, an internal dialogue occurring between his two aspects. Banner's scientific mind calculated trajectories, escape velocities, the effects of air resistance. The Hulk's instinctive understanding of his own strength integrated these calculations. When his eyes opened again, they burned with purpose. With a roar that shook the surrounding trees, the Hulk crouched, muscles tensing, and then launched himself upward with a force that shattered the ground beneath him. He tore through the jungle canopy like a missile, the air around him heating from the sheer velocity of his ascent. Higher and higher he soared, the jungle shrinking beneath him, the curvature of the planet becoming visible as he reached the upper limits of the atmosphere. His momentum began to slow as the air thinned, gravity reasserting its pull. For a moment it seemed he would fall short, plummeting back to the surface without reaching his target. Then, as if sensing his predicament, the Hulk's rage intensified. His body, already pushed beyond the limits of what should have been possible, grew further, muscles swelling with power drawn from the very fabric of this reality that had never fully accepted him. With one final surge he breached the upper atmosphere, entering the cold vacuum of space. Before him loomed the Tyranid hive ship, an organic monstrosity the size of a small city pulsing with alien life. The vessel's sensory apparatus detected his approach, tentacles and spore-launching orifices turning toward this unprecedented threat. The Hulk, untroubled by the vacuum that would have killed any normal being, oriented himself with subtle movements, aiming for the ship's central mass. His trajectory carried him directly into the largest opening on the vessel's surface, a moic aperture used for launching spores. He tore through membranous barriers, plunging into the ship's interior. Inside, the environment was nightmarish. Organic corridors pulsed with fluids while Tyranid defender organisms converged on the intruder. The Hulk fought his way deeper, each blow destroying another section of the living ship. Specialized warrior forms created specifically to combat his abilities swarmed him from all directions. Their claws evolved to penetrate his tough hide, drew fluorescent blood that boiled away in the ship's atmosphere. But for every wound they inflicted, the Hulk grew stronger, his rage feeding on the pain. He fought deeper into the vessel, instinctively seeking its core, the central nervous system that connected this ship to the hive mind itself. On Katachchan's surface, the 183rd Regiment fought desperately against waves of Tyranid attackers. The battle seemed hopeless. The Imperial forces massively outnumbered, but then something unprecedented occurred. The Tyranid assault faltered, organisms suddenly acting without coordination, attacking each other or standing immo, confused by the sudden absence of synaptic commands. Harker realized, watching as a Carnifex previously charging their position, suddenly stopped and began attacking smaller Tyranids around it. He's disrupted the hive mind's control. In orbit, the Hulk had reached the ship's synaptic core, a chamber filled with pulsating brain-like tissue connected to the broader hive mind. Tyranid defender organisms fought with increasing desperation, somehow understanding the existential threat he posed. The Hulk, his body covered in wounds that closed almost as quickly as they were inflicted, tore into the central mass, ripping out chunks of the psychic tissue that maintained the ship's connection to the greater Tyranid consciousness. As the connection weakened, the ship itself began to react, internal structures constricting in an attempt to crush the invader. The Hulk's response was to strike harder, faster, his blows becoming so powerful that they threatened the structural integrity of the entire vessel. Fractures appeared in the organic hull, fluids venting into the vacuum of space. With a final devastating series of blows, the Hulk destroyed the synaptic core completely. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Without connection to the hive mind, the ship's biological systems went haywire. Some sections began to attack others, while vital functions simply ceased. The vessel began to break apart, massive sections tearing free as internal pressures sought release. The Hulk, sensing the imminent destruction, fought his way toward the outer hull. Behind him, cascading biological failures accelerated, turning the once formidable vessel into a rapidly expanding cloud of organic debris. With a final blow, he punched through the ship's exterior, launching himself free of the disintegrating structure just as catastrophic ruptures consumed it completely. From the surface of Katach-chan, the destruction was visible as a new temporary constellation in the daytime sky. The hive ship's remains burning up in the atmosphere. Without synaptic control, the Tyranid forces on the planet fell into disarray, making them vulnerable to concentrated Imperial counterattacks. The threat wasn't eliminated completely, but it was reduced from existential to manageable. The Hulk's descent to Katach-chan was less controlled than his ascent. He plummeted through the atmosphere, his body becoming a meteor bathed in fire. The impact created a crater 3 kilometers wide, destroying a section of jungle that would take centuries to regrow. For days, nothing emerged from the impact site, leading many to believe that even the Green Giant's legendary resilience had finally met its limit. Then, a week after the destruction of the hive ship, sentries reported movement at the crater's edge. The Hulk emerged, his body visibly smaller than before, exhausted by the ordeal, but still very much alive. He made his way to the Imperial command post where Colonel Strecken waited. "You actually did it," the colonel acknowledged, genuine respect in his voice. "Saved a lot of lives today." The Hulk nodded, uncharacteristically subdued. Alliance worked. "Bugs hurt bad." "So what happens now?" Strecken asked. The question that had been deferred suddenly relevant again. The Alliance was against the Tyranids. That threat is diminished for the moment at least. The Hulk was silent for a long moment, internal dialogue occurring between his dual aspects. When he spoke again, his voice carried unusual nuance. "Hulk, go find own place. Not with orcs, not with humans. Somewhere else." Strecken studied the Green Giant thoughtfully. Protocol demanded he report this creature to the Ordo Xenos immediately. By all Imperial doctrine, the Hulk represented a Xenos threat that should be eliminated. But pragmatism suggested another approach. Better to let this powerful being leave on his own terms than provoke a confrontation that would cost more lives. "There's a lot of galaxy out there," the colonel said finally. "Some of it even the Imperium hasn't claimed yet. If you keep to yourself, don't threaten Imperial worlds, maybe we don't need to be enemies." "Smart human," the Hulk acknowledged with what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Hulk, remember?" 2 days later, the Hulk departed Katach-chan on a salvaged Tyranid vessel, modified by his surprisingly adept hands to serve as a crude but functional spacecraft. The Katach-chan 183rd, following Colonel Strecken's orders, recorded the incident as anomalous Tyranid behavior leading to self-destruction, with no mention of the Green Giant who had turned the tide of battle. Yet, rumors spread, as rumors always do, in the vastness of the Imperium. Tales of a green-skinned warrior who fought alongside humans against the Tyranid menace. Stories of impossible strength and indomitable will. Myths that joined countless others in the collective consciousness of humanity. Most dismissed as mere fabrication by Imperial authorities. 5 years later, on the frontier world of New Tanth, settlers reported strange incidents in the wilderness beyond their fortified compounds. Something large moved through the forests, leaving massive footprints and occasionally helping lost colonists find their way back to safety. The few who claimed to have seen the creature described it as green-skinned and enormously strong, but possessed of unexpected gentleness when not threatened. Inquisitor Eisenhorn, passing through the system on other business, heard these tales and recognized elements that matched classified reports he had reviewed years before. He spent a week in the wilderness, following the trail of the mysterious being. On the 7th day, he found himself in a clearing before a crude but serviceable shelter built into the side of a mountain. The massive figure that emerged to greet him matched the descriptions perfectly. Green-skinned, powerfully muscled, yet with eyes that held intelligence and purpose rather than mindless rage. The Hulk had indeed found his own place far from both human and Xenos civilizations, a refuge where he could exist without constant conflict. Inquisitor, the Hulk acknowledged, surprising Eisenhorn with his recognition. Come to kill, Hulk. Eisenhorn, who had faced countless threats to the Imperium across his long career, found himself in the unusual position of uncertainty. By doctrine, this being represented a potential threat that should be eliminated. Yet the reports from Katachchan, classified though they were, suggested a capacity for alliance, even nobility of purpose when circumstances aligned. I came to understand, the Inquisitor replied carefully. The galaxy grows more dangerous by the day. The Tyranids advance from the east. Chaos stirs in the Cadian Gate, and ancient evils awaken that have slumbered since before mankind reached for the stars. In such times, knowledge is as valuable as bolter shells. The Hulk studied him with unexpected perceptiveness. Ask questions, then Hulk. Answer some, not all. For 3 days, Inquisitor Eisenhorn spoke with the being who called himself the Hulk, learning of his origins in another reality, his arrival through a tear in the fabric of space-time and his experiences since. The Inquisitor recorded everything, though he encoded the data with ciphers known only to himself. On the morning of the 4th day, as Eisenhorn prepared to depart, the Hulk made a statement that would haunt the Inquisitor for years to come. Bigger storms coming. Hulk feels it. Reality weakening. More things coming through. Things like you? Eisenhorn asked, a chill running down his spine despite his customary composure. The Hulk's expression darkened. Some worse. Much worse. When Eisenhorn returned to Imperial space, he filed a report so heavily redacted that only the highest ranks of the Inquisition could access the complete text. He recommended monitoring rather than immediate action, a controversial position that earned him censure from more orthodox members of the Ordo Xenos. But influential voices, including representatives from the Katachchan 183rd, who had witnessed the Hulk's assistance firsthand, supported his position. Thus, the Green Giant, who had once threatened to conquer the stars with an orc wag, found an uneasy acceptance at the fringes of Imperial society. Neither friend nor foe, but something unprecedented. A being from beyond reality, whose true purpose remained his own, but whose path occasionally crossed with humanity's when greater threats emerged from the darkness between stars. Legends grew around him, as is the way of the Imperium. Some claimed he was a lost Primarch, others a weapon created by the Emperor himself during the dark age of technology. The truth, as always, was stranger than any fiction Imperial scholars could devise, and in the depths of space, in regions where reality grew thin, entities beyond comprehension stirred. The Hulk had been merely the first, a harbinger of things to come. The multiverse was vast beyond imagining, and the barriers between dimensions had been weakened. What might follow in his wake remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, even the mightiest must find allies where they can. For the Hulk, caught between worlds and eternally apart from both, the struggle continued. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for the simple right to exist in a universe that had never been meant to contain his power. As Eisenhorn's ship disappeared into the warp, the Hulk turned his gaze to the stars above New Tanth. Somewhere out there the Tyranids regrouped. Chaos forces marshalled and ancient Necrons stirred in their tombs. Sooner or later, one or all would threaten this world he had claimed as sanctuary. When that day came, the galaxy would once again witness his rage, his power, and perhaps in glimpses rarely seen, the humanity that still dwelled within the monster. He growled to the uncaring cosmos, Hulk always ready,